Hello, good afternoon. Today is Thursday, May 18th, 2023. My name is Ashley Glover, and I'm here with attorney Deanna Eble, and we've got a good one for you today. This presentation is Medicaid rules are changing. Now is the time. So as usual, let's get warmed up with a few housekeeping items. We should be together for about 30 minutes. We put together a PowerPoint, which is being shared on screen along with our webcams. To help minimize background noise, your mics are muted, so you'll want to use the Q&A box to submit questions. We will try our best to address them as we go along. We also received several questions during registration, which we will try to address at the end of the presentation. Feel free to use the chat box to leave us a message or to say hi with each other. We are recording this and we'll email you a link to the recording. And finally, we value your feedback. So please let us know how we did in the survey, which will appear on your screen once the webinar ends. All right, now I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Miss Deanna Eble. Deanna is a partner at Russo Law Group. She has 20 years experience in practice areas such as elder law, estate, special needs, and Medicaid planning. She's the lead planner in our Islandia office, and she also meets with clients in Garden City, virtually, and home visits. Deanna was just recognized with a 2023 Premier Business Women of Long Island Award, and she is currently appointed to the executive committee of the New York State Bar Association. So, Deanna, thank you so much for being here. Cannot wait to hear what you have in store for us today, and I'll hand it over.
Perfect. Thank you, Ashley.
All right.
Hello, everybody. I wish I could see you in person. So we're going to cover a lot today with regard to Medicaid and what's coming, what we've known about, how it's expected to change. But I just wanted to, before we dive into what we're actually going to be covering, I had a conversation with a client the other day that made me think maybe we should just add this little piece to it, because I feel like when we talk about Medicaid, we almost throw a blanket over it and make it seem like it's one big thing. And I want to just give some clarity that there are some nuances. There's Medicaid on the marketplace, which is the Affordable Care Act. Some people call it the Obamacare. And that is really just somebody who doesn't have any kind of health insurance. They meet the criteria that are set and they are able to get health insurance through Medicaid through Department of Social Services. What we're talking about today is community Medicaid, and often other times or often interchangeably Medicaid home care. And that is really for somebody who is in the community. They have care needs that need to be addressed. Their care needs aren't so extreme that they need the skilled care of a nursing home, and they want to be home and getting the care at home. Nursing home care is another component of Medicaid, and that's more of the extreme need to be in a facility. Maybe it's for safety reasons in addition to the skilled care you need. And it's round the clock, 24/7. Somebody's always there keeping an eye on you. Nurses are there around the clock. So the question I got the other day is, mom has Medicaid home care and now she's in rehab and likely going to have to stay in the nursing home. And does my Medicaid cover that? Home care doesn't cover that. Medicaid nursing home rules are different. They have a 5-year audit of the assets. And so somebody who is qualifying for what we're talking about today really has to take a step back and look at what their future looks like. And if they need any extended care in a nursing home that they want covered by Medicaid, that is something that they have to convert. It's a conversion application. They convert their home care Medicaid into nursing home Medicaid, and they're in that conversion subject to the rules that the nursing home would have as far as how to qualify. I just wanted to have a little clarity there. So today what we're going to cover are the proposed changes that are out there for Medicaid home care. And I'll go through that and give you a little background on that. The Medicaid look-back period for home care, which is one of those proposed changes, and a transfer penalty rule, because there's conversation about the possibility of imposing penalties, which I'll explain what that means, and also how things affect our pooled income trusts, and a little information on exactly what a pooled income trust is, because I know not everybody knows what that is. All right, Ashley, let's get started. So proposed rule changes for Medicaid home care. Understand that we talk about this as if they're new rules, but these rules were actually part of the New York State budget that got approved in April of 2020. These rules were supposed to take effect in October of 2020, and then the world shut down with the public health emergency. COVID-19 stepped in and took over for 3 years. And the New York State was not allowed to change the rules and make it more difficult to receive any of the benefits that they were offering under Medicaid and still maintain their federal funding. So that's why what we're saying are new rules are rules you've been hearing about, or if you've Googled, you've seen exist. And they've existed since August of 2020, but they have not been implemented yet because we were in that public health emergency. And so with that public health emergency, understand that has been lifted, and that's why we're having this conversation today, because things may be coming. Bad news, yes, but not yet. So the New York State Medicaid warning is that this rule that has been on the books since April of 2020 is set to be implemented, meaning that they're going to train the Department of Social Services staff and start reviewing applications with this in mind. They're saying right now, March 31st of 2024, so next year. What are they talking about? They're talking about a 30-month look-back period, which means a 30-month audit. So anybody who's done anything in the nursing home world or has any familiarity with buzz about nursing home, you know that there's a 5-year rule. A 5-year equates to 60 months. When they set this rule, they just said, okay, well, nursing home is 60 months. It makes sense. We'll just cut the home care one in half and make it 30 months. It's 30 months of providing every single bank statement, whether the account is open or closed, over the last 30 months prior to someone wanting care in their home for Medicaid, covered by Medicaid. And what happens is a worker actually sits and goes line by line to see what assets there were, what transfers there were. Was there money here? Did money go from mom to you? Do you meet any criteria for exceptions? And if you don't meet any criteria for exceptions, they're going to impose a transfer penalty. We'll get into the transfer penalty a little bit more in just a few minutes, because I really want to get you to a point that you understand what the transfer penalty is. But I just wanted to give you a background of what news we're talking about. There's also some conversation, and it's been implemented on some level, about the changes in how Medicaid does the assessments to provide the care. But let's start with something good for a change. So next slide. So in the 20 plus years that I'm doing this, I'm excited to tell you that one of the positives that Medicaid is making is they're starting to recognize that individuals who are looking for these services still need to be able to maintain some kind of lifestyle. And those of us who live on Long Island understand that living on Long Island is not cheap, and that rent is insanely expensive. And I'm happy to report that the income levels and the asset levels have almost doubled in the last year. So currently, somebody these numbers, the income levels that I'm showing are specific to Medicaid home care. And I'm making that distinction because if you're looking to convert to nursing home care, there's a different income number for nursing home care. I don't want anyone to just go into it thinking it doesn't matter which type. Each program has some different nuances. So in a home care setting, you are allowed, if you're looking for Medicaid to pay for home care, you are allowed $1,697 per month. And if you're paying for a supplemental insurance premium, that, for example, would be AARP, GHI, Blue Cross Blue Shield, those premiums can also be paid for. So, AARP may be $300 a month, so you're getting $1,697 plus $300. So you're almost at $2,000 that you're allowed to keep and maintain your lifestyle at home. Okay. That's what you're allowed to pay for and have income for. If your income then is over that, we will talk in a little bit on a future slide about what happens with the income when you're on community Medicaid. The upside again also is that over the from December to February, Medicaid also increased what you're allowed to keep as assets. So I was at a meeting this morning, and I was reminiscing with somebody that when I first started this, it was only $2,000 or $3,000 that you were allowed to keep in your name, and 20 years later we're up to 30,000, which almost doubled from last year, because last year it was just shy of 17,000. So to be able to keep 30,000 in your name is a bit of a game changer. And the fact that we are also allowed to have our house with an equity interest up to $1,033,000 is an indication that there's recognition for the way the market is going right now, and we don't want the average person to be in jeopardy because the equity of their house puts them over in some way, shape, or form. We're recognizing the marketplace. So this is something positive to take away from today, because I feel like when we start talking about the other changes, people will walk away a little defeated, but there's always something we can do. And the fact that you're part of this discussion is an indication that you're forward thinking and you want to get ahead of it, so that if there's any changes that need to be made in anticipation, you're ready for them. So moving forward. Currently, so even though there's law on the books changing things, currently that law isn't implemented yet, and we are still following the following rules. Those rules are that there are no penalties for transfers, which means that you can have, $1 million in your name today, transfer it out of your name by May 31st, and then June 1st, you could apply for Medicaid because you would be below the $30,182. It doesn't mean that you'll have services starting that day. You still have to apply. You still have to get approved. There could be some retroactive activity there. But at the end of the day, you will have that opportunity to apply and not worry about what you've done and how you've changed things. Somebody was asking, I'm trying to stay on because I know there's going to be a lot of questions. Somebody was asking if the income and asset allowance take effect March 31st as well, or are they in effect now? Those are in effect now. Those changes are now. And if you apply for both parents in the community and you need, I'll get to a trust in a minute. I'm trying to stick with the topic that we're talking about. So there's no look back right now, which means that you don't have to give 30 months worth of documents. We do suggest that you give 3 months worth of documents. And the reason why we suggest that is because if you're applying for yourself and you have medical bills that are for the last couple of months, if you qualified in that time period, then Medicaid, when they approve, they're allowed to retroactively cover somebody 3 months back from when they applied, assuming they're eligible. So in my example where I said you have $1 million, you transfer it out by May 31st, and then you would be technically eligible June 1st. You're not going to be eligible for retroactive coverage, but somebody else who maybe had only $20,000 in their name and they decided they need the care, they apply for Medicaid on June, by June 1st, Medicaid will look at their expenses, and if there are outstanding bills in May, April, March, they will consider payment on them. Please understand, reimbursement is done at Medicaid's rate, which is not the private pay rate that you're paying. But if there's some opportunity for reimbursement, it's better than nothing. It won't make you whole, but it will give you something. So there's certainly a push to try and get anybody who needs the care to apply for Medicaid before the rules change. Right now, it's not so much the rules changing, it's the implementation of the rules, and that date is March 31st of next year. So we're really looking to encourage people to apply for Medicaid in the community if they need the care, I would say by the end of February next year, so that you have an opportunity to get in there and not worry about the assets that you transferred. Okay, so let me just I want to give you a scenario that we're going to play out in both instances so that you understand how this works. So Anna is a widow. She's 85 years old. She lives alone. She was recently diagnosed with mild to moderate dementia, and she doesn't have long-term care insurance. She has 2 children, Barbara and Mary Beth. She owns her house in Nassau County for $700,000, and she has liquid assets of $250,000, of which $100,000 is an IRA. And she has Social Security of $2,000 and a pension of $750,000. So in this instance, I could tell you right off the top, we gave you the number of $1,033,000 for the equity in the house. So her house is exempt. I still would probably want to transfer the house so that Medicaid doesn't put any liens on it. And at the moment, in the scenario we're talking about, we're under the current law where there are no transfer penalty being imposed on Anna. So I would probably transfer the house so that there's not the possibility down the road of any liens being put on the property. Medicaid allows her to own the house up to $1,033,000. They'll provide Medicaid, but they will put liens on the property and say, we'll provide the Medicaid, and then when the houses get sold, we'll get reimbursed. But she can still have the house in her name. She doesn't have to transfer the house. With regard to the assets, we have $250,000 here, and this distinction that $100,000 of it is IRA money is a very important distinction, because under the Medicaid rules, when you have retirement accounts, as long as those retirement accounts are placed in a maximum payout status, those accounts can stay in Anna's name and do not have to count against the assets. So when I tell you that she's allowed $30,182 in assets, if she maximizes the distribution on the IRA, we are not worrying about that. We're not counting that. We just have $150,000 left of liquid assets that we have to be mindful of in what we're doing. When I say maximize the IRA, I mean there is a distinction between the required minimum distribution that you're receiving from your accounts right now based on IRS rules and the maximum distribution. The IRS and social services do not use the same life expectancy tables. Social services uses the Social Security tables, which they don't let you live as long, so they're slightly different. You have to use those tables. You do not have to do it right now if you're not applying for Medicaid. You only change to the maximum benefit when you are looking for Medicaid to start. It is something you do when you're looking to apply, and you can do it at the same time as when you apply for Medicaid. So don't start changing your distributions now based on this conversation. So we would probably be transferring the $150,000 of cash, or $150,000 less the $30,000 she's allowed to keep. So we're down to $120,000. In some way, shape, or form, we would transfer it to Barbara and Mary Beth. We would want to understand their background, what's going on in their world, whether they meet any exceptions, and just a little bit about them so that we make sure we don't affect them at all with the transfer. The Social Security and pension are $2,750, so she's over the almost $1,700 that she's allowed. But despite the fact that she's over that amount, at the same time, we can do a pooled income trust, which I'll get into more detail about in a few minutes. But the pooled income trust is going to allow us to protect some of that income. So I'm all about repetition because I feel like it helps people grasp the concepts. So if you go to the next slide, Ashley, we'll go over that again. So the first step is to transfer the home to Barbara and Mary Beth. That's the safe bet because we know that if we transfer the home, there won't be any liens put on the property. And then step number 2 is transfer the cash that exceeds the $30,182 again to Barbara and Mary Beth. And the last step is to make sure that the IRA is making monthly distributions consistent with Medicaid's life expectancy tables, which are actually the Social Security tables. So in doing all of this, please understand that this is based on the current law that is still in effect today for home care. If you do any of these transfers, you have to revisit how these transfers happen in a circumstance where you're looking to convert an application to nursing home care if those transfers took place within 5 years of nursing home care, because these transfers will affect nursing home eligibility. I just want to take 1 second and see if I can answer. There's a lot of people on, so I'm trying to be mindful of the fact that you're asking questions, and I like to answer while we're in the moment. But it is hard to stay on task and answer all your questions knowing how many people there are. How do you calculate the maximum distribution of the IRA? That is based on the social services tables, and you have to take the value of the IRA, divide it by the number that's listed for the age of the individual, and then divide by 12. We divide by 12 because Medicaid calculates on a monthly basis. Are there any gift tax issues? You should file a gift tax return. There shouldn't be a gift tax to pay because right now the gift tax exclusion is upwards of 12 million. And if somebody has that kind of liquidity, they're not likely applying for Medicaid. What if the 401k or 403 are not in distribution? How are they counted? If a 401k, 403b, IRA are not in distribution, they are counted as an asset, and they can all combined, that account plus savings, checking, money market, any other investments cannot exceed the $30,182. So you want to make sure that they're in a distribution payout so that they're not counted in that. And I'll do one more and then we'll get back to our program. Transferring the house, what is the impact on the step up? So just for clarity, transferring a house, you have to understand that there is value in inheriting property from somebody. So in some instances, we transfer the house with a life estate for the parent so that there's still an inheritance. The inheritance allows the house to have a tax value as date of death, as opposed to having a tax value like if Barbara and Mary Beth receive the house and Anna doesn't keep any interest, then Barbara and Mary Beth will have a tax starting point of the value that mom had when she received it, or maybe some partial when dad passed. And so you have to be mindful of that. And it's more of a discussion on what the benefits are versus do the pros and cons. If you keep mom's name on in some respect, it will allow her to also maintain the real estate tax exemptions that she's currently getting. And that might be something that is beneficial, but you have to understand the pros and cons of keeping her name on there in some format. Okay, so moving on, Ashley. What happens if there's this Medicaid look-back period for home care is implemented as it's set to be doing on March 31st of 2024? All right, so as I mentioned, we believe that it's supposed to start March 31st, 2024. That's what the current Department of Social Services, New York State website says it, the government website says it right now. If it's implemented, it will be a 30-month look back, which just means an audit of 30 months worth of documents. And you're going to need to provide proof that a community-based long-term care services are required. Some of that proof is already something that's happening now. But let's go back to how this picture changes with Anna if we have to start implementing these changes. So moving on. The Medicaid transfer penalty rules for home care. What does this mean? So get the rep in here. Let's blow the whistle on this, and we're going to transfer the transfer penalty and non-exempt asset transfers. What is this all about? What are we talking about when we talk about penalties? How does that get calculated, and what does it really mean? Well, let me start by explaining it to you from a nursing home standpoint, and then I'll tell you why I'm doing that. Right now, the average cost of nursing home care on Long Island is understood to be $14,136. And the reason why we need to know that is because essentially what happens is Medicaid, if someone's looking for Medicaid to cover the nursing home, they do an audit of 5 years worth of documents, and they add up all of the transfers that were made that didn't satisfy a penalty. And they then say, Medicaid says, that for every $14,136 that were transferred out of the applicant's name to somebody that was not an exception under the rule, that's 1 month, Medicaid is not going to cover them for nursing home care. And there's ways to recoup that and give the money back and pay the nursing home and do other plans, but that's the concept. And so why am I talking in terms of nursing home when I made it clear at the beginning that really our conversation is home care changes? The reason why I'm talking about nursing home is because if you have to look at a positive of the changes that are being imposed or possibly implemented, is that currently they're using nursing home rate numbers to calculate the penalty for home care, which means that most home care services cost somewhere between $7,000 and $9,000, maybe $7,000 and $10,000 a month. You're getting credit for $14,136. So unless the law changes, we're using nursing home numbers to calculate penalties for home care, which will make the penalties in home care less of a penalty. Over time, it'll be less of a penalty. In understanding that, in understanding why they did that, and part of what I'm going to explain going forward is that in creating this rule and passing this budget, there wasn't a lot of, I don't want to be mean. The thought process in doing this resulted in just taking these rules and pushing them through into the nursing home nursing home section of Medicaid. So when we look at what is unfolding in the community, what's unfolding in the community is really based on just the same concepts as nursing home. They just dropped everything in there. So in this instance, it makes sense and it works really well. But there are some instances under this current law that we have to scratch our head and say, but wait a minute, we need clarity on this. So Ashley, if you want to switch to the next slide. One of those instances that we need clarity on because of the way that the law was just set in place is that there is a rule in the nursing home world that says that the homestead is exempt, which it's still exempt for home care, but that some transfers in the nursing home world are exempt transfers. So let me just give you this slide in a nutshell, and then I'll go through this slide with you, and then I'll summarize it for you. We need to understand, is the transfer exempt since you're transferring an exempt home? and the house is less than, that means the house is less than $1,033,000. So it's exempt. And if you transfer it, is there a problem, or is there a penalty? Because technically it's exempt. Does the homestead exempt transfer provisions apply to Medicaid home care eligibility? Because those provisions are nursing home provisions, but you put the home care rules in the nursing home section. Is there any clarity? We need them to consider their ruling and give us a sense of how they're going to view all of this. Two of the biggest things that we do from a planning standpoint in a crisis is there's an exception under the rule that a sibling who has an equity interest and is residing in the home 1 year prior to institutionalization, transfers to them is exempt. So layman's terms, what does that mean? My sister and I own the house together. I need nursing home care. We're both on the deed, and the deed gets transferred. We've owned it together for more than a year. I can transfer my interest to her, go into the nursing home, and there's no penalty for that transfer because we're siblings and we have an ownership interest. Is that going to be the same for home care? Are they going to allow for those transfers even though I'm not going anywhere, I'm staying there? Are they going to allow me to transfer to my sister and not count any penalties for that transfer? My half has a value, and are they going to take that value and divide it by 14,136? Right now, we're hoping the answer is no, but we need clarity. One of the other big exceptions that we see a lot is a caregiver child exception, where if a child is living in a home with a parent for 2 years prior to the parent needing nursing home care, and then the parent goes into the nursing home, that house can be transferred to the child with no penalty. So if the child is living in the home for 2 years and the parent needs home care, can we transfer that home to that child so that there's no liens put on the home without there being a penalty? Unfortunately, the law was set in place in 2020, and because of the public health emergency, really nothing has been done to give clarity on that. So we still need guidance on whether or not those issues are going to be resolved. And it may be as simple as just the Department of Social Services comes out with a written explanation of how they're going to implement those changes. But those are things that we will keep you updated on. So definitely stay on our mailing list and make sure that you stay in the know. And you can catch Vincent on CFN. I know he's always bringing these points to the airways as soon as they come into play and we know more information. So let's get back to Anna. All right. How do these changes affect Anna? So she's still a widow. She's still 85. She still has moderate dementia, and she still doesn't have long-term care insurance. She still has the same 2 children, and her house is still worth $700,000. And she still has the same assets and income. How is this going to look in a world after March 31st of 2024 when we're trying to get her Medicaid in the community? So Ashley, next slide. Step 1, we're going to make sure that the IRA is making monthly distributions similar to step 3 in the last, the way we presented this last time. We're going to start and make sure, take the easy road. We're going to make sure her distributions are properly paying out. Step 2 is we're going to do a plan that will consist of gifting a portion of the money, which will create a penalty. So this is where it gets complicated. Where last time under the current law, we were able to just make transfers and move on. Now we know that there's a penalty here. So this is the kind of plan. Steps 2 and 3 are the kind of plan we implement in a circumstance where somebody is 1 foot in a hospital, 1 foot in a nursing home, they're getting ready to stay there long-term, and they have assets. Well, now we have to start implementing that same plan in a circumstance where somebody's at home and they made transfers. And the way to do all of this, it's complicated, but I want to try and get you to understand. What we're doing is we're doing a calculation, and in that calculation, we're saying we are going to say that this money over here in pot A is gift. And we know from the conversation we've been having for the last half hour, I'm sorry I went over, it was just important to be detailed. So we know that that gift is going to have a penalty. How are they calculating the penalty? For every $14,136 this year, the numbers change every year, they are going to divide the gift by that $14,136 and say they aren't going to provide home care to mom because of that gift. We're going to say, okay, we accept that. And then there's still money left behind, because remember, we didn't transfer all of it as a gift. The money that's left behind, we're going to borrow it from mom. I'm going to borrow money from her, and then every single month I'm going to do a loan. She's going to loan me money. And the loan payment, similar to your mortgage and your car loan, you pay it back every single month. We are going to come up with a number every single month that we have to pay back to mom to pay back the loan over a certain amount of time. The amount of time that it takes us to pay back that loan will be consistent with the amount of time with the amount of months that Medicaid is not going to pay for the gift that was made. It's complicated. I know your heads are spinning, but it is basically breaking it down to some of the money is gifted money, and we know it's gifted money, and we know that there's a penalty and Medicaid will not pay for the care. But while we're securing that money, we're going to loan some money on the other side to monthly pay mom back for whatever it is that was gifted. The loan doesn't get penalized. It doesn't get divided by that 14,136 because of the fact that there's a promise to pay it back. So every month that we pay it back, we are protecting that month's worth of gifted money. Okay. All right. That's a lot to take in. So now what happens with Anna with this extra income? We've been talking about how she has roughly $1,000 of excess income. Next slide. Pooled income trusts. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with them, but if you're not, this is a perfect way to have that opportunity to keep your money, keep your income to be able to pay for your expenses and at the same time get the services that you need. Medicaid's options, if you want to go to the next slide, Medicaid's options are you can either take the excess money, give it to Medicaid or the home care agency, pay that money down on the cost of your care first before Medicaid kicks in the first penny. If you had $100, $200 excess, and you said you wanted to do that, it's not such a big deal. But, you know, in Anna's case, it's almost $1,000 of excess money. That's a big deal. So the criteria to fund a pooled income trust is that you have to be 65 or older, you have assets and income, and you transfer those assets. There's advocacy efforts being made right now because with this change in the law, the pooled income trusts are something that is in question about whether or not under the transfer penalty rules, we're going to be allowed to use the pooled income trust. Right now, there's no problem at all using the pooled income trust. The pooled income trust is income only. So you're going to transfer the income into this trust. Well, what is this trust? Where do I go to set it up? This trust is specifically established with a charity. There are roughly 22 charities in New York that are approved for this type of trust. And all it is going to the charity, you establish the trust fund, you take the excess income, you give it to the charity has administrative expenses that they charge monthly. usually on a sliding scale based on the income that you're giving them. And then you submit bills of moms. So Anna's bills will go to the charity to be paid. They are not going to pay more than what Anna is giving them. So if Anna has $1,500 worth of bills every month and she only gives the charity $1,000, they'll pay up to the $1,000. If she only has $750 worth of bills and she gives them to the charity, but she gives the charity $1,000, that $250 difference will accumulate in her account. And in accumulating, it'll be available for her to use if she needs it. The upside to Anna is that she gets to keep her income to pay for her monthly expenses because it's expensive to be in New York. The upside for the charity is any money that's left behind is money that goes to them on Anna's passing. So Ashley, I know that's so much information to give people, but if you'd like to go to the next slide, I could give some tips and some traps because one of the other things that it's important to know is that Medicaid in the community is, it used to be that you could apply for community Medicaid and then while you were waiting to hear, you were able to start the assessments for physical assessment to make sure you got the hours. They have already implemented this change where you cannot do the physical assessment without having the financial approval. There's a two-part physical prong. You're supposed to be able to call a number and get 2 appointments scheduled within 14 days of each other. The first prong is for somebody to come in from Department of Social Services. They have an agency that does it. That is to do a physical assessment and make sure that as a Medicaid applicant who just got financially approved, you also meet the criteria to need Medicaid services physically. That's activities of daily living, washing, dressing, toileting, transferring, feeding. They come in, they do a very lengthy assessment to determine whether or not you actually need the care. So anybody who's thinking, I'll just apply and then hold on to it until I need it. The caution is that you do have to renew and questions do get asked. And so you just be mindful of that. The second assessment is to determine how many hours. I know in a lot of the questions that were previously sent, there was a lot of conversation about 24/7. Please, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I do have clients that are getting 24/7 care, but the reality is it is very difficult to get 24/7 care, especially the further you get out on the island. And not so, it's two-pronged in the difficulty. One, it's difficult to get approved for it. Most people who get 24/7 care are bedbound and need turning and positioning so that they don't get bed sores. Or I've seen circumstances where there's just such an extreme toileting need at night and there's a history of urinary tract infections and delusions, and that it's so well documented that there's a way to move that along and get that service. But the other problem that we're seeing, especially because of the pandemic, although I think it's a little alleviated a little bit in Nassau, definitely still existing out in Eastern Suffolk, is actually you can get approved for hours and then finding somebody to come and provide the care is the other hurdle. So just be mindful of that because, it could be discouraging to go through all of this and then not actually be able to get the care. And there's some great agencies out there that are helping people and doing a great job with the staff that they have, but it is a hurdle and we're all here. So with that being said, some of the tips and traps is individuals should implement Medicaid planning now if considering filing for Medicaid. So if you have a need for it and you're on the fence, the sooner you apply, the better, because you're under the current rule and not the new rule. Individuals should file before March 31st if they need the benefits. Note how we keep saying if they need the benefits, because if you're just doing it to get in there and you don't need the benefits, you may not be able to keep it and you may have to reapply. Certainly monitor the updates and implementation of the new rules. We are very good at, updating our website, doing e-blasts, doing different alerts, newsletters. So don't hesitate to sign up for our newsletter, because we get all this information out and that kind of stuff. And be an advocate. If you have a family member that needs the care, make sure that you are helping to get them that care. So just as a summary on the next slide, I know we went over, I apologize. The new law went on the books April of 2020 to take effect October 1st of 2020. It was set to do a 2.5-year look back on documents, which equates to 30 months. The penalty to being imposed once it is implemented will count any transfers that happen after October 1st on. Okay, so nothing before October 1st, unless you're looking for nursing home care, and then it could be before October 1st. There's still questions about the use of the pooled income trust and transfers of the house, but stay tuned, because we will definitely keep you updated on that. I know that we went over. I apologize that we went over. I'm going to try and answer a few more questions, and then I'll turn it back over to Ashley. I know that there were some questions about irrevocable trusts. Irrevocable trusts are definitely a planning option. Irrevocable trusts can still be used now under the current law, because they wouldn't impose a penalty yet if you're applying for Medicaid now in the community. They are subject to a 5-year look back for nursing homes, so you definitely want to make sure you get it done sooner than later. There is no age limit on when to set up a irrevocable trust. Just understand that an irrevocable trust is essentially you giving up control of that asset in some respects. So you just want to have a conversation and understand what is really involved with that. And if you did an irrevocable trust now and applied for Medicaid home care before March 31st of 2024, you would be okay. And let me take one or two more from this list. So why not transfer the house to a trust? It's the same concept. You could transfer the house to a trust. I actually prefer that, but in a crisis, sometimes we go directly to the kids because it's just easier. We need to see what everybody's dealing with. Monthly distributions are considered income. Anything that looks like income is income. So if you are taking your IRAs and turning them into monthly distributions, you're in the income column. That's why it doesn't count in the asset column, as long as it's the right distribution. A lot of questions about IRAs. So IRAs, really just understand with retirement funds, as long as you're putting those retirement funds in the proper payout, it's an income. It's not an asset. And that's huge, because your family can still inherit that. On your passing, your family can still inherit that asset. So it's a big deal I wouldn't spend down retirement funds first. I would spend down and make transfers of anything else that's in your name, because anything you do with retirement accounts is taxable. So if someone had $100,000 of retirement funds, but other liquid also, I'd leave the retirement funds the way they are, because you get taxed on that when you take it out or transfer it in any form. If you put somebody else's name on it, it's a liquidated asset, so you pay tax on that. Ashley, I think I'm going to pass it to you now, because I am sorry that I know it's very important, and I'm so happy to see so many of you still stayed on, even though we went over. But I do respect people's time, and I want to give you a chance to do your wrap up.
Okay. Thanks, Deanna. Next slide, we have what makes Russo Law Group different. Well, our clients tell us that it's our dedication, accessibility, scope of legal services, and years of experience that gives them the peace of mind and confidence when working with us. We will not learn at your expense. Our attorneys are extremely knowledgeable, and Long Island News called us the leading elder law firm on Long Island. We've helped over 17,000 families, and we help a diverse group. We are proud to discuss our services in your preferred language, including Spanish, Italian, Mandarin, and American Sign Language. Our firm has 11 attorneys, and we stand ready, willing, and able to step right in and help. We have 3 convenient office locations. We offer home visits and virtual appointments for you. We have a peace of mind program that provides you with the security of knowing that your attorney is accessible whenever you have questions or potential problems or opportunities related to your estate plan. And it helps ensure that your comprehensive plan is well maintained. Here are a list of our services and how we can help you and your family. We have a robust website at bjrussolaw.com. We offer terrific information, forms, checklists, resources, so take advantage of it. It's there for you. In conclusion, we appreciate all of you for joining us. Please leave us your feedback in the survey that will appear on your screen momentarily. I know Deanna and I are looking forward to reading your responses. In case you missed any portion of today's webinar, it was recorded and we will email you a link to the recording.
All right. Have a
All
great day,
right.
guys, even though it's fall in the spring.
Yeah, Deanna, wonderful job explaining those complicated information and addressing questions. That was great. Thank you.
I wish I
Yeah.
could have gotten to all of them, but there wasn't enough time.
Rock star. All right, everyone have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.